The Earth hung like a blue jewel against the vast blackness of space, its continents clearly visible from the viewport of Admiral Eris Thorne's office aboard the Solar Defense Coalition's orbital command station. He'd seen this view countless times over his decades of service, but it never failed to remind him of everything humanity had accomplished and everything they stood to lose. Thorne's weathered face reflected in the reinforced glass as he turned away. At 62, his once dark hair had long since faded to steel gray, and the lines around his eyes had deepened with each passing year. Yet his posture remained ramrod straight, a testament to his 40 years in the SDC. He was 6 months away from retirement, though he suspected he might extend his service again. The thought of civilian life held little appeal after losing his family to a border skirmish 15 years earlier. "Admiral, the Council is waiting," Lieutenant Anya Sharma said from the doorway, her voice carrying the slight musical lilt of her upbringing in the Martian colonies. Thorne nodded. Lieutenant Sharma was young, too young, perhaps, for her position as communications officer on his staff, but her brilliance was undeniable. Fresh from the academy, she still carried that idealistic spark that most veterans had long since lost. "Any word from intelligence?" Thorne asked as they walked along the curved corridor toward the conference room. "Commander Reyes will be presenting the quarterly threat assessment," Sharma replied, her dark eyes scanning her tablet. "The report mentions increased activity near the Proxima colonies, but nothing requiring immediate attention." Thorne grunted in acknowledgement. Kalen Reyes had been his intelligence chief for 8 years, a pragmatic officer with a healthy dose of paranoia, exactly what Thorne wanted in someone responsible for anticipating threats. The two often clashed on minor issues, but Thorne trusted Reyes's instincts implicitly. When they entered the conference room, civilian Governor Valerius was already seated at the head of the table, flanked by various political appointees and military officials. His thin face was set in its usual expression of mild disapproval. "Admiral Thorne, how kind of you to join us," Valerius said, not bothering to hide his impatience. "Perhaps we can now begin the quarterly defense review?" Thorne took his seat without responding to the barb. The relationship between the military and civilian leadership had always been strained, with Valerius perpetually concerned about the resources allocated to defense during what had been nearly 3 decades of relative peace. The meeting proceeded with the usual reports: fleet readiness, recruitment numbers, budget projections. Commander Reyes delivered his threat assessment with characteristic thoroughness, highlighting potential concerns with the non-human species at the edges of known space, but concluding that no imminent large-scale threats existed. "Which brings me to my proposal," Valerius said after Reyes finished. "Given the continued stability of our borders and diplomatic relations, I believe it's time to consider a 15% reduction in the SDC's operational budget." Thorne's jaw tightened. "Governor, with all due respect, our current force posture barely meets minimum readiness standards. The outer colonies contribute less than 8% to the solar economy while consuming nearly 20% of the defense budget," Valerius interrupted. "We cannot continue to maintain this level of military spending based on theoretical threats." "Theoretical until they're not," Thorne countered. "Our early warning systems have declined in effectiveness by 12% over the last 5 years due to maintenance deferrals. Half our rapid response fleet operates with outdated targeting systems. The lights in the conference room suddenly flickered, then went out completely, plunging them into darkness before the emergency systems activated with a dull red glow. "What's happening?" Valerius demanded. Lieutenant Sharma was already at a communications terminal. "Sir, we're receiving multiple emergency signals from Earth defense platforms," she reported, her voice suddenly tense. "Something's penetrated our outer sensor grid. Multiple unknown contacts approaching Earth at... That can't be right." "What is it, Lieutenant?" Thorne was already moving toward the main display. "They're moving at speeds we can't track effectively, sir. They're already past Luna orbit. Hundreds of objects, maybe more." The station's alarm began to wail, a sound Thorne had heard only in drills. "Battle stations," he ordered automatically. "Give me a direct link to Fleet Command. Communications are being jammed," Sharma reported, her fingers flying across the interface. I can't. The entire station shuddered violently, throwing several people from their chairs. Outside the viewport, a brilliant flash of light erupted from Earth's northern hemisphere, followed by another and another. My God, someone whispered. They watched in helpless horror as more flashes bloomed across Earth's surface. Cities that had stood for centuries vanished in instants. The planet's defensive grid fired sporadically, energy beams lancing out into space, but finding no targets. Whatever was attacking them remained invisible to both human eyes and military sensors. We need to evacuate, Reyes said, grabbing Thorne's arm. The station could be next. Thorne couldn't tear his eyes away from the viewport. The blue jewel was changing before his eyes, angry red and orange wounds spreading across its surface. Admiral, Reyes insisted. The decision crystallized in an instant. Sharma, send an emergency broadcast on all channels. All SDC personnel to fall back to Mars defense perimeter. Authorization, Thorne Alpha 70. Yes, sir. Governor. Thorne turned to Valerius, who stood transfixed by the devastation below. We need to get you to a secure facility. Valerius seemed to age 10 years in those few moments. What are they? He asked, his voice hollow. Who would do this? I don't know, Thorne admitted. But we're going to find out. As they rushed toward the evacuation shuttles, another violent tremor shook the station. Warnings blared through the corridors. Thorne knew the station wouldn't last much longer. Just before boarding, he took one last look through a viewport at Earth, his home for 6 decades. Vast stretches of the planet were shrouded in smoke and dust, with fires visible even from orbit. Billions of lives snuffed out in minutes, without warning, without mercy, without even a declaration of war. In that moment, something inside Thorne hardened into unbreakable resolve. Whatever had done this would pay. No matter how long it took, no matter the cost, he would find them, and he would make them pay. The attack had come without warning, without communication, without demands. One moment, Earth had been the thriving heart of human civilization. The next, it was a charred ruin. The attackers had struck with surgical precision, targeting major population centers, military installations, and orbital infrastructure simultaneously. Earth's defensive systems had been overwhelmed by weapons and stealth technology, unlike anything humanity had encountered before. And then, just as quickly as they had appeared, the attackers vanished, leaving only strange energy signatures that matched no known species. Thorne, who had been at the orbital command station when the attack began, made his way to Mars with the surviving leadership. The journey was tense, every moment spent expecting another attack that never came. When they arrived, the true scale of the catastrophe became clear. Earth's population had been reduced from 11 billion to fewer than 500 million in less than 6 hours. Most survivors were in underground facilities or remote areas that had somehow been overlooked. The remaining SDC forces were scattered and disorganized. Communication networks had been severed, command chains broken. In the chaos, Thorne found himself elevated to Supreme Commander of all remaining SDC forces by emergency protocols, a position he had never sought and now wished desperately he didn't need to hold. From a bunker deep beneath the Martian surface, Thorne and his team began the painstaking work of assessing what remained of humanity's defenses. The picture was grim. Nearly 60% of the fleet had been destroyed in the initial attack, including 3 of 4 flagships. The rest were dispersed across the solar system and beyond, many cut off from communication. We've analyzed the energy signatures left by the attacking vessels, Commander Reyes reported 3 days after the attack. His usually immaculate uniform was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. They don't match anything in our database, but there's a clear pattern, a quantum resonance frequency that seems to be their propulsion signature. Can we track it? Thorne asked. To a point, Reyes replied. The trail leads toward the Kronos Abyss. The room fell silent. The Kronos Abyss was a region of space approximately 20 light-years from Earth, notorious for its space-time distortions that made navigation nearly impossible. Ships that ventured there rarely returned. Are they hiding there or passing through? Thorn asked. Unknown, sir. But given their technological capabilities, they may be able to navigate the distortions. Thorn nodded slowly. Do we have a name for them yet? Lacking any communication or clear identification, we've designated them Sileni, the Silent Ones, Reyes said. It seems appropriate. The Silent Ones, Thorn repeated, tasting the bitterness of the name. What about their origins? Motivations? Nothing concrete, sir. Theories range from an ancient species awakening to some kind of extra-dimensional entity. Without more data, Reyes shrugged helplessly. Lieutenant Sharma, who had been quietly working at a terminal, looked up. Sir, Governor Valerius is requesting your presence for an emergency broadcast to all colonies and outposts. 30 minutes later, Thorn stood beside Valerius in front of a camera array. The governor had aged years and days, his face gaunt with grief and responsibility. People of Earth and her colonies, Valerius began, his voice steady despite everything. 3 days ago, our homeworld suffered an unprovoked attack of unprecedented scale and cruelty. The heart of human civilization lies in ruins, billions of our brothers and sisters gone in an instant. He paused, visibly gathering himself. But humanity endures. We stand united in our grief and in our resolve. I am hereby declaring a state of total war against the aggressors known as the Sileni. Every resource, every facility, every hand that can contribute to our defense, and our response will be mobilized. Valerius turned to Thorn. Admiral Thorn, as Supreme Commander of the Solar Defense Coalition, will now outline our military response. Thorn stepped forward, acutely aware that his words would reach every human settlement across dozens of star systems. The attack on Earth was executed with advanced technology and without provocation, he stated, his voice carrying the weight of authority honed over decades. We now know the aggressors left traces leading to the Kronos abyss. Our mission is clear. We will find these Sileni, and we will hold them accountable for their actions against humanity. He took a deep breath before continuing. I am hereby activating final counterstrike directive. All remaining military assets will be consolidated. All shipyards on Mars, Venus, and the asteroid belt will begin continuous production. Every civilian vessel capable of modification will be armed and incorporated into our forces. Thorn's eyes fixed directly on the camera. We will build a fleet unlike any in human history. A force so overwhelming that it will ensure not just victory, but the continued existence of our species. Our target, 900,000 warships of various classes. He heard Valerius's sharp intake of breath beside him, but continued without pause. This is not a number chosen for strategic necessity alone, but as a symbol of our absolute commitment. For every 1,000 humans lost, we will send one ship to deliver justice. As he spoke, Thorn was fully aware of the logistical insanity of what he proposed. Even with every resource available, building such a fleet would take years. But he also understood the psychological necessity. Humanity needed more than vengeance. They needed purpose, something to unite behind as they rebuilt from ashes. This will not be quick. It will not be easy. But it will be done, Thorn concluded. The Sileni struck without warning and disappeared without a trace. But make no mistake, we will find them. And when we do, they will learn that humanity does not fall quietly. The broadcast ended, and Valerius immediately rounded on Thorn. 900,000 ships? Have you lost your mind, Admiral? That's impossible. With respect, Governor, impossible is no longer a concept we can afford, Thorn replied evenly. Besides, the number serves its purpose. Hope is what people need now, even more than ships. Hope has limits, Admiral. Reality doesn't care about our symbolism. Then we'll just have to bend reality, Thorn said, his jaw set. It wouldn't be the first time humanity has done so. The unprecedented mobilization effort began immediately. The shipyards of Mars, already substantial, were expanded to triple their capacity. The massive mining operations in the asteroid belt, once focused on civilian needs, were redirected to extract materials for warship construction. Every available engineer, pilot, and soldier was called to service. Old Jacks, as everyone called him, had been building ships for nearly 50 years. The elderly engineer had technically retired 5 years earlier, but returned the day after the attack. Now he oversaw the reactivation of decommissioned vessels and the retrofit of civilian ships into military support craft. "This old girl's got some fight left in her," he muttered, patting the hull of a cruiser that had been scheduled for decommissioning. His gnarled hands moved with surprising dexterity over the ship's exposed systems. New targeting arrays, upgraded shields, and she'll be better than those fancy new models. Working alongside him was Kai, a young pilot whose entire family had been in Singapore when the Sileni struck. Barely 22, his face still held the softness of youth, but his eyes burned with a cold fury that never seemed to abate. "We'll be fast enough?" Kai asked, handing Jax a calibration tool. "The retrofits, the new builds, will we be ready before they come back?" Jax paused, considering the young man. Carefully. "Speed isn't everything, boy. Russian gets ships built, but it also gets crews killed. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. My family died because we weren't ready," Kai said, his voice tight. "And rushing won't bring them back," Jax replied gently. "But building ships that will actually protect their crews and win fights might prevent more families from suffering the same fate." Throughout the solar system, similar scenes played out as humanity threw itself into the war effort. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Workers in manufacturing plants took on double and triple shifts. Children collected scrap materials. Every human settlement, from the gleaming domes of Mars to the cramped habitats of the outer moons, contributed to the cause. Meanwhile, the intelligence division under Commander Reyes worked tirelessly to locate the Sileni. The energy signatures were difficult to track, seeming to fade and reappear unpredictably, but always pointing toward the Kronos abyss. "It's like trying to follow footprints across water," Reyes complained during one briefing, 18 months after the attack. "The trail keeps disappearing into these space-time distortions." Could they be using the distortions deliberately? Thorne asked. "As cover? Possible. Or they might actually reside within the abyss somehow." Reyes sighed, running a hand through his hair, which had begun to show streaks of gray. "Rumors are spreading among the crews that the Sileni are ancient guardians awakened by our expansion or biological weapons escaped from some long-dead civilization's laboratories, or even beings from another dimension. What do you believe?" Thorne asked, studying his intelligence chief carefully. Reyes shrugged. "I believe in data, and we don't have enough. But whatever they are, they're not like anything we've encountered before." The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A deep space sensor array that had been presumed destroyed in the initial attack suddenly transmitted a final data packet before going permanently silent. The array had captured partial tracking data on a group of Sileni vessels after the Earth attack, confirming they had indeed headed directly into the Kronos abyss. More intriguingly, the data packet contained a severely corrupted recording of a strange signal emanating from within the abyss itself. A signal distinctly different from the Sileni energy signatures, but equally alien. "It's just background noise," Reyes insisted after reviewing the recording. "Radiation interference from the abyss distortions." But Lieutenant Sharma wasn't convinced. She spent weeks analyzing the signal, eventually discovering a complex mathematical structure hidden within the apparent chaos. "Look at this pattern," she explained, displaying a visualized algorithm to Thorne and Reyes. "It repeats with variations that follow specific mathematical progressions. This isn't random noise. It's a language, or at least a deliberate transmission." "From whom?" Thorne asked, studying the complex patterns on the display. "I don't know," Sharma admitted. "But it's not Sileni. Their energy signatures have a completely different pattern structure. There's something else in the abyss, sir. Something trying to communicate." Thorne stared at the display, considering the implications. Could it be a trap? Something to lure us in? "Possible," Reyes said immediately. "Or a warning," Sharma countered. The mathematical structure has elements that suggest urgency, repetition like you'd find in a distress call or alert. For 3 years, the shipyards worked without pause. The initial goal of 900,000 ships had seemed impossible, but humanity's determination proved greater than anyone had anticipated. By the beginning of the 4th year after Earth's devastation, the combined fleet, dubbed the Avenger fleet in public broadcasts, was taking shape. Coordinating such a massive force presented unprecedented challenges. Ship designs and technologies varied widely, from the newest destroyers with experimental weapon systems to centuries-old mining vessels retrofitted with armor plating and missile launchers. Training crews to operate as a unified force became one of Thorne's greatest concerns. "We've divided the fleet into tactical groups based on capabilities," he explained during a staff meeting. "Each veteran crew will be paired with 4 new ones for on-the-job training. We're conducting battle simulations daily, but there's only so much we can prepare for. And if we encounter the Sileni before the fleet is fully ready?" Valerius asked. The governor had recovered some of his composure over the years, but remained a shadow of his former self. "Then we adapt," Thorne said simply. "But every simulation shows our numbers will eventually overwhelm even their advanced technology." Political pressure to launch the fleet grew with each passing month. Various factions within both the military and civilian leadership pushed for different approaches, some advocating immediate departure with available ships, others suggesting extreme measures like developing biological weapons or sacrificing outer colonies to concentrate defenses closer to Mars. Thorne resisted them all, insisting on a unified fleet with proper training and equipment. But even he knew they couldn't wait indefinitely. Finally, nearly 5 years after the attack on Earth, the Avenger fleet gathered at a classified rendezvous point beyond Saturn's orbit. The sight was breathtaking and somber. Ships of every size and configuration, stretching into the darkness of space as far as the eye could see. They had achieved their target. 900,000 warships, from massive dreadnoughts to small, agile fighters, each representing 1,000 lost souls. Standing on the bridge of the flagship Redemption, Thorne addressed the assembled fleet commanders through the communication network. "Today, we embark on a mission unlike any in human history," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "We carry with us the hopes of all humanity and the memory of those we lost. Our target lies within the Kronos abyss. Our objective is clear: find the Sileni and ensure they can never threaten humanity again." He paused, looking at the faces of his officers on the bridge. "I won't speak of glory or honor. This is a grim task that has been thrust upon us. But it is necessary for Earth, for our future, for those who can no longer speak for themselves." With a nod to his navigation officer, Thorne gave the order that would be relayed throughout the fleet: execute synchronized FTL jump. Destination: Kronos Abyss Perimeter. In a carefully choreographed sequence, the largest coordinated faster-than-light jump in human history began. Group by group, ships vanished from normal space, their engines creating brief flashes of light against the darkness. The journey had begun. The hunt was on. The journey to the Kronos Abyss took nearly 2 months, even with the advanced FTL drives of the newer vessels. The fleet traveled in a defensive formation, with scout ships constantly patrolling the perimeter. Despite the vigilance, no sign of the Sileni was detected during transit. Life aboard the ships settled into a routine of drills, maintenance, and waiting. But beneath the surface discipline, tension simmered. Some crew members, like Kai, burned with the desire for vengeance. Others secretly feared what they might find at their destination. Many wondered if they would ever return. 3 more ships reporting drive malfunctions. Admiral, Lieutenant Sharma reported during one of the daily status briefings. That brings the total to 28 since departure. Thorne nodded, unsurprised. Many of the older vessels were operating well beyond their design limits. Have them fall back to support positions. What about the inter-fleet exercises? Improving, sir. The coordination between different ship classes is now at 73% efficiency according to combat simulations. Not good enough, Thorne said. We need at least 85% before we engage the enemy. Commander Reyes entered the briefing room, his face grave. Sir, we've had another incident between the Martian 5th Squadron and the Europa Defense Group. A disagreement over resource allocation escalated to drawn weapons. Thorne closed his eyes briefly. It wasn't the first such incident. The fleet comprised forces from every human settlement, each with their own procedures, priorities, and grievances. Keeping them unified was a constant challenge. Have the senior officers report to me, he ordered, and implement Protocol 7 for both squadrons, separate patrol routes for the next cycle. As they approached the outer boundary of the Kronos abyss, the environment began to change. Space itself seemed to warp and twist in subtle ways. Sensor readings became unreliable, reporting phantom objects that vanished when investigated or failing to detect actual asteroids until ships nearly collided with them. Communication between vessels deteriorated. What should have been instantaneous transmissions experienced delays or arrived corrupted. Navigation systems faltered, forcing ships to rely on visual confirmation and older, more robust technologies. It's like the laws of physics are negotiable here, old Jax commented, studying the readings from the engineering station. Quantum fields fluctuating, gravitational waves intersecting unpredictably. Can the fleet handle it? Thorne asked. Jax scratched his gray beard. The newer ships should be fine. Their systems have enough redundancy. Some of the older retrofits. I'm not so sure. We'll lose a few to the environment alone, I expect. Thorne had anticipated this. Order the fleet to reduce speed by 30% and increase spacing. All vessels to activate gravitational field stabilizers and reinforce shielding. Even with these precautions, the casualties began. A scout ship disappeared into a suddenly appearing gravitational eddy. Two transport vessels collided when their navigation systems gave contradictory readings. A small destroyer was crushed when it passed through what seemed to be normal space, but turned out to be an area of dramatically increased pressure. And then, without warning, the Sileni appeared. They emerged from what looked like tears in the fabric of space, sleek, dark vessels with no visible propulsion systems or weapons ports. They struck with terrifying precision, targeting isolated ships or those that had fallen behind the main formation. The first engagement came when a patrol group of cruisers detected anomalous readings near a particularly dense distortion field. Before they could report back, 3 Sileni vessels materialized and opened fire. Their weapons bypassed the cruiser's energy shields completely, causing structural degradation at the molecular level. The lead cruiser disintegrated in seconds. The second managed to return fire, but conventional weapons seemed to pass through the Sileni ships without effect. The third cruiser, commanded by a veteran officer, made the desperate decision to ram the nearest Sileni vessel. The resulting explosion destroyed both ships, but provided the first crucial information. The Sileni could be damaged by physical impacts. Before the fleet could adapt to this knowledge, the Sileni vanished again, slipping back through their spatial tiers. They're using hit-and-run tactics, Reyes observed during the emergency briefing that followed. Striking vulnerable targets and withdrawing before we can mount an effective response. They're testing us, Thorne realized. Probing our defenses, learning our capabilities. Sir, Lieutenant Sharma interjected, I've analyzed the energy readings from the Sileni vessels during the attack. There's something odd. They seem to be drawn to certain energy emissions from our ships, particularly the quantum fluctuation patterns from our FTL drives. Can we use that? Thorne asked. Possibly, Sharma replied. If we could modify our energy signatures to act as decoys, or she stopped suddenly, her eyes widening. Or we could use the strange signal pattern I decoded from the sensor array data. For what purpose? Reyes asked skeptically. The Sileni avoided targeting our communication ships, even when they were vulnerable, Sharma explained. What if they're wary of that signal pattern? What if there's another force in the abyss that they're concerned about? Thorne studied the earnest young officer. Her theories had proven valuable before, and they had few other options. Work with engineering to implement this. If there's even a chance it gives us an advantage, We need to take it. While Sharma and Jax worked on modifying the fleet's communication arrays, Thorne developed new tactics based on what they'd learned. Ships were organized into defensive clusters, with physical barrier vessels protecting the more advanced but vulnerable destroyers. Kinetic weapons, essentially massive projectiles, were prioritized over energy-based systems that seemed ineffective against the Scilenii. Deeper into the abyss they traveled, the distortions growing more violent, the attacks more frequent. Each engagement brought losses, but also information. The fleet learned to detect the subtle warping of space that preceded a Scilenii appearance. They discovered that synchronizing shield frequencies in a specific pattern could provide some protection against the molecular degradation weapons. Kai distinguished himself during these battles, his rage channeled into uncanny piloting skills. His fighter squadron developed a technique of swarming Scilenii vessels, confusing their targeting systems long enough for larger ships to deliver devastating kinetic strikes. After one particularly brutal engagement, Thorne summoned his core team, Reyes, Sharma, Jax, and now Kai, whose tactical innovations had earned him rapid promotion to squadron commander. "We've lost nearly 40,000 ships," Thorne said without preamble. "At this rate, by the time we reach whatever lies at the center of the abyss, we'll have less than half our original force." "The signal modifications are helping," Sharma reported. "Scilenii attacks decrease by 22% in areas where we broadcast the modified pattern, and they seem more hesitant when they do attack. We've also identified a pattern to their spatial tiers," Kai added. "They're not random. They follow specific gravitational contours. We can predict likely emergence points with about 60% accuracy now." "It's not enough," Reyes said bluntly. "We need something more definitive." Thorne gazed at the tactical display, where the strange, swirling center of the Chronos abyss pulsed with unknown energies. "Then we push forward to the source. According to our latest data, we're less than 2 weeks from the epicenter of both the Scilenii energy signatures and Lieutenant Sharma's mysterious signal." "What do you expect to find there, sir?" Jax asked. "I don't know," Thorne admitted. "But whatever it is, it's where we'll find our answers." The core of the Chronos abyss defied all expectations. There were no planets, no stars. Instead, a vast artificial structure hung in the void, seemingly woven from space-time itself. Non-Euclidean in geometry, it appeared to fold in on itself in ways that human eyes struggled to comprehend. The structure, quickly dubbed Chronos Core by the fleet, emitted both the energy signatures associated with the Scilenii and the complex mathematical signal that Sharma had been studying. It appeared ancient yet perfectly maintained, alien in a way that transcended mere biological differences. As the fleet approached cautiously, weapons primed and shields at maximum, something unexpected happened. The core remained passive. No defensive systems activated. No Scilenii vessels emerged to protect it. Instead, portions of the structure began to shift, revealing what appeared to be enormous apertures or gateways. Simultaneously, the mathematical signal changed, becoming clearer and more structured, evolving from what Sharma had interpreted as a warning to what now seemed unmistakably like an invitation. More puzzling still, Scilenii vessels suddenly appeared from multiple directions, but instead of attacking the human fleet, they focused their weapons on the Chronos Core itself. "What the hell is happening?" Reyes demanded, staring at the tactical display in confusion. "Why are they attacking their own base?" "I don't think it's their base," Sharma said slowly. "I don't think the core belongs to the Scilenii at all." "Then who does it belong to?" Thorne asked, watching as the bizarre structure absorbed the Scilenii attacks with minimal visible damage. "I think we're about to find out," Sharma replied, pointing to the main view screen where the mathematical signal had been translated into a sequence of universal mathematical constants, followed by what unmistakably appeared to be a simplified representation of a human vessel approaching the core. Thorne faced an impossible decision. The fleet had come to destroy the Scilenii, to avenge Earth. They had found what appeared to be their headquarters, yet everything about the situation contradicted their assumptions. The enemy wasn't defending this place, they were attacking it. and whatever dwelled within was trying to communicate. After a tense strategy session with his command staff, Thorn made his choice. Prepare a scientific vessel with enhanced shielding. Lieutenant Sharma, you'll lead the contact team. Sir, with respect, that's an unacceptable risk. Reyes objected immediately. This could be an elaborate trap. It could be, Thorn acknowledged. Which is why you'll be going with her, Commander. Your skepticism will be valuable. And the fleet, Kai asked, will maintain position and continue defending against Sileni attacks. If this goes wrong, Thorn didn't need to finish the statement. Everyone understood the stakes. The scientific vessel approached one of the open apertures in the Kronos core, escorted by a squadron of fighters led by Kai. As they drew closer, the structure's true scale became apparent. It was vast beyond comprehension, with the aperture alone large enough to accommodate a dreadnought. Inside the core, Sharma and Reyes found no physical beings waiting to greet them. Instead, as they reached what appeared to be a central chamber, the environment itself changed. The walls, floor, and ceiling, already difficult to distinguish due to their non-Euclidean geometry, began to pulse with intricate patterns of light. Both officers experienced a sudden sensation of presence, not physical, but unmistakably conscious, filling their minds. They're trying to communicate directly, Sharma gasped, her training barely keeping panic at bay. The presence resolved into coherent thoughts and images, introducing itself as the Weavers of the Abyss, an ancient species dedicated to preserving the physical laws and stability of space-time in this region. Through a cascade of complex mental images and concepts, the Weavers revealed a horrifying truth. The Sileni were not a species at all, but ancient autonomous weapons hijacked by a cosmic parasitic entity known as the Scourge. This entity spread by assimilating technology and biology, using its victims' own weapons against them. The Scourge had attacked and nearly assimilated the Weavers eons ago. The Sileni vessels that had attacked Earth were actually weapons stolen from another civilization the Scourge had destroyed, and the energy signatures were corrupted versions of the Weavers' own technology. The attack on Earth had been a probing action by the Scourge, testing the defenses of younger species before proceeding with full assimilation. The Kronos Abyss was the last stronghold of the Weavers and the focus of the Scourge's current offensive. When Sharma and Reyes transmitted this information back to the fleet, it created profound shock and division. The vengeance mission that had driven humanity for 5 years was suddenly rendered meaningless. Their true enemy wasn't the Sileni, but the Scourge, an existential threat not just to humans, but to all life. A significant faction within the fleet, led by a subordinate admiral who had lost his entire family on Earth, refused to believe the Weavers. They demanded that the original plan proceed, destroying the Kronos core and anything associated with the Sileni energy signatures. It's a deception, the admiral argued over the command channel. A sophisticated ploy to weaken our resolve. These Weavers probably created the Sileni in the first place. Thorn faced the greatest leadership challenge of his career. Half the fleet was on the verge of mutiny, convinced that their mission of vengeance was being undermined by alien manipulation. He made an unprecedented decision, broadcasting all data from the Weavers, including Sharma and Reyes's complete sensor logs and mental impression recordings, to every ship in the fleet. He included additional analysis showing how Sileni weapons matched the profile of stolen and corrupted technology and images of worlds the Scourge had assimilated, as provided by the Weavers. I understand your pain, Thorn addressed the fleet, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. Every ship in this fleet represents 1,000 lives lost. Every one of us carries the weight of Earth's devastation. I came here seeking the same vengeance you did. He paused, allowing his words to reach every corner of the massive fleet. But we now face a truth more complex than we anticipated. The enemy that struck Earth was not what we believed. The Sileni are weapons, not a species, tools of an entity that has destroyed countless civilizations before ours. Thorn's face hardened. If we allow blind vengeance to guide us, if we strike at the Kronos core instead of the true threat, we condemn humanity to the same fate as those who came before us. The Scourge will not stop with what it has already taken. It will consume every human settlement, every colony, until our species exists only as resources for its expansion. The resistance persisted, but as the evidence accumulated and more officers studied the data, support for the mutiny faction waned. Kai, whose hatred of the Sileni had defined him for years, became an unexpected ally when he addressed his fellow pilots. "I lost everyone," he said simply. "My parents, my sisters, my grandparents, all gone in minutes. I've dreamed of nothing but making the Sileni pay. But if destroying them means leaving the real killer free to finish what it started, what's the point? My family deserves better than an empty gesture that dooms what's left of humanity." Eventually, Thorn regained control of the fleet, though not without cost. Several ships broke formation and launched an unauthorized attack on the Kronos core, only to be devastated by the Scourge forces. Their sacrifice, while painful, served to demonstrate the futility of attacking without understanding. With order restored, Thorn established formal communication channels with the Weavers. The process remained challenging. The Weavers' non-physical existence and radically different perception made direct dialogue nearly impossible. Instead, they communicated through complex mathematical models and simulated scenarios that Lieutenant Sharma and her team gradually learned to interpret. The Weavers revealed the Scourge's weaknesses. Though nearly invulnerable to conventional attacks, the entity relied on a central control intelligence that coordinated its assimilated units. This core consciousness operated on specific energy frequencies that, if disrupted with precisely calibrated counterfrequencies, would temporarily disable its control over the assimilated units. In exchange for this knowledge, the Weavers offered to provide technological upgrades to a portion of the human fleet. Using principles beyond current human understanding, they could enhance shield systems to resist the molecular degradation weapons and modify communication arrays to interfere with the Scourge's control signals. "They're asking a lot of trust from us," Reyes cautioned during the command briefing. "Do we have a choice?" Jax responded, "We've lost nearly 200,000 ships already, and we've barely made a dent in the Scourge forces. What guarantees do we have that these upgrades won't just give them control of our vessels?" another officer demanded. "None," Thorn admitted. "But consider this. If the Weavers wanted to destroy us, they could have let us attack the core without warning us about the Scourge. Instead, they've shared information that explains everything we've observed since Earth was attacked." After intense debate, Thorn authorized the upgrades for 300,000 vessels, while keeping the remainder of the fleet at a safe distance as a precaution. Engineers like Jax worked alongside the Weavers' manifestations, implementing changes that would have been unimaginable just weeks earlier. As the modifications proceeded, the Scourge intensified its attacks, as if sensing the shifting balance. Sileni vessels swarmed the defensive perimeter in unprecedented numbers, forcing the unmodified human ships to engage in desperate holding actions. During one particularly vicious assault, Kai's squadron found itself cut off from the main fleet. Surrounded by Sileni craft, they faced certain destruction until Sharma, monitoring from the Kronos core, recognized a pattern in the Scourge's attack coordination. "Squadron Leader Kai," she transmitted, "the Sileni vessels surrounding you are all operating on the same control frequency. If you can modulate your communication array to broadcast on these parameters, you might disrupt their coordination long enough to escape." "Understood," Kai replied tersely, implementing the changes while evading constant fire. "Broadcasting now." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Sileni vessels suddenly ceased their perfectly synchronized movements. Some drifted aimlessly. Others began firing at random targets, including other Sileni ships. "It works," Kai shouted, leading his squadron through the momentary chaos. "The disruption works." This small victory provided the template for a larger strategy. Thorn and the Weaver representatives developed a plan to strike at the heart of the Scourge forces besieging the Kronos core. The upgraded human vessels would form the vanguard, using their new defensive capabilities to penetrate deep into the Scourge formation, while the Weavers would create localized space-time distortions to isolate portions of the enemy fleet. This isn't just about survival anymore, Thorne told his officers during the final briefing. This is about changing the course of a war that's been raging across the galaxy for longer than humanity has existed. If we succeed, we not only avenge Earth, but potentially save countless worlds from the same fate. The battle that followed was unlike anything in human military history. 900,000 ships had departed on a mission of vengeance. Fewer than 600,000 remained, now fighting alongside entities they had come to destroy against an enemy they hadn't known existed. The upgraded vessels advanced in tight formation, their modified shields absorbing punishment that would have annihilated them days earlier. Behind them came waves of kinetic strike vessels, launching physical projectiles at velocities approaching light speed. Flanking the formation, hundreds of smaller squadrons executed Kai's disruption tactics, temporarily severing the Scourge's control over outlying Sileni units. From the Kronos core, vast waves of energy pulsed outward, the Weaver's contribution to the battle. Where these waves passed, space itself seemed to fold, trapping Scourge vessels in isolated pockets where they could be targeted and destroyed without reinforcement. At the center of the Scourge formation, a massive construct began to emerge, a writhing, biomechanical monstrosity that seemed to incorporate elements of dozens of different technologies and biological designs. This was the local manifestation of the Scourge's control intelligence, forced to materialize in response to the coordinated attack. All vessels, target the central structure, Thorne ordered. Maximum firepower. The response was devastating. Thousands of kinetic projectiles, energy beams, and missiles converged on the Scourge intelligence. Its defensive systems, though advanced, couldn't counter so many simultaneous attacks from so many directions. Kai led a special strike team directly into the maelstrom, carrying a device developed jointly by human engineers and the Weavers, a quantum resonance bomb designed to disrupt the specific frequency patterns that allowed the Scourge to maintain control over its assimilated units. "We've got one shot at this," Kai told his pilots as they weaved through the chaos of battle. "The bomb has to detonate inside the central structure's core to be effective. The entry point will be open for approximately 3.7 seconds. Sharma's voice came through the communication channel. "After that, its adaptive defenses will seal the breach." "That's all we need," Kai replied, his fighter accelerating toward the massive construct. The final approach was a gauntlet of defensive fire and gravitational shear. 3 of the 6 escort fighters were destroyed in seconds. Kai's vessel took multiple hits, systems failing across the board. "I'm not going to make it to the delivery point with enough speed," he reported, watching his engine output falling rapidly. "Not with the package." Without hesitation, he made his decision. "Taking the bomb into the structure myself." Manually triggered. Detonation. "Kai, no," Sharma protested. "We can find another way." "There is no other way," he replied calmly. "In no time. Tell Admiral Thorne. This is for Earth. For all of us." His damaged fighter, carrying the quantum bomb, plunged directly into the narrow opening in the Scourge intelligence. Moments later, a brilliant flash of energy erupted from within the construct, expanding outward in concentric waves of blue-white light. Throughout the battlefield, Sileni vessels suddenly ceased their coordinated attacks. Some drifted powerless. Others began to break apart as though their molecular structure was unraveling. The massive Scourge intelligence construct contorted, its form rippling with cascading failures, before collapsing in on itself in a spectacular implosion. In the aftermath, as the human fleet regrouped and assessed their losses, a strange calm descended over the battlefield. The Sileni vessels, those that remained intact, hung motionless in space, their controlling intelligence severed. From the Kronos core, the Weavers communicated a somber message. This was only one manifestation of the Scourge. Others existed throughout the galaxy, though this victory had dealt a significant blow to the entity's expansion. 2 weeks later, Admiral Thorne stood in the observation deck of the Redemption, gazing at a holographic display of the galaxy. Scattered across its vast expanse were markers indicating suspected scourge activity areas. Dozens of them, some close to human colonies. The memorial service was beautiful, Lieutenant Sharma said quietly, joining him at the display. Kai would have been embarrassed by all the attention. Thor nodded. Heroes usually are. He gestured to the galactic map. The Weavers have shared everything they know about the Scourge's likely locations. Our mission has changed entirely from what we set out to do. From vengeance to protection, Sharma observed. Yes. Thorne studied the map thoughtfully. 900,000 ships built to avenge Earth. Now, they'll serve to ensure humanity's survival, and perhaps the survival of countless other species as well. He turned to face the viewport, where the vastness of space stretched before them. Send the order to the fleet. We're not going home yet. The Scourge is still out there, and now we know how to fight it. Beyond the viewport, the assembled warships of humanity prepared for their next mission. They had come seeking retribution for an unforgivable crime, only to discover a threat greater than they could have imagined. The burden of vengeance had transformed into the responsibility of guardianship, not just for their own species, but for all life threatened by the Scourge. The journey of revenge had ended. The real battle had just begun.